Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We've got a great crowd joining us here today, and we're very excited about today's webinar. I'm Kevin Gully, the Vice President of Products with Truelytics, and today we're going to be talking about the Great Transition, a term we've coined here at Truelytics. The Great Transition refers to the changes that are happening to the financial advisor market due to the combined megatrends of demographic shifts both among advisors and investors, the rapidly evolving regulatory and compliance challenges, and the technology revolution that is taking place with AI, robo-advisors, and all kinds of additional cutting-edge technology, all of which will be profoundly impacting the wealth management segment of the financial services industry over the next decade. I'm pleased to be joined today by experts in the field. First, attorney Larry Gennari, who will be our moderator for today's panel. Larry is a finance and transactional lawyer at Gennari Aronson LLP, a Boston-based law firm. He's also an adjunct professor at Boston College Law School. And Larry's going to be guiding us through a discussion about the main forces driving change in the Great Transition. In our panel of experts today, we're joined by Terry Mullen, the CEO and founder of Truelytics, who will be bringing insights from a successful 30-year career in financial services distribution as a senior executive with AIG, Lincoln Financial, and Sun Life, among others. We're also joined today by Paul Lally, the CEO of Chapel Bridge Advisors, an investment banking firm. And he's also the co-founder of Gladstone Associates, a business advisory firm focused on the wealth management sector of the financial services industry. And finally, I'm happy to welcome Brendan McSheffrey, co-founder and president of Truelytics, who actually is the first one who came up with the term the Great Transition, and he'll be providing insights from his over 20 years as a technology entrepreneur. Before we get started, a couple of quick administrative items. First, we're going to leave some time for Q&A at the end of today's session, so feel free to ask questions in the questions section of your GoToWebinar app. Second, keep your eyes peeled for an invitation to our next webinar. We'll be having one next month, and it's shaping up to be a great one. And finally, or I should say third, after our panel discussion, Terry's going to be walking us through a quick demo of the Truelytics Software as a Service platform and reviewing how the Truelytics solution can help every firm owner prepare themselves for this transition by delivering business insights, benchmarking, and valuation so each firm is ready and prepared to face whatever the Great Transition is going to bring to them. And finally, today's session is being recorded, and we will make it available for your review after the session. For now, I'd like to hand over to Larry Gennari to kick things off and walk us through what is sure to be a very interesting discussion. So take it away, Larry.
Kevin, thank you so much. I'm delighted that folks could join us on the phone to talk about this, the really important changes in a really important industry. As many of you know, one of the most important roles, certainly in New England, but throughout the country, is the role of advisor. The trusted advisor, someone who's able to help people help their families for generations. And so it's really interesting that here we're starting to talk about the important changes that the advisor industry is facing. Like many industries, like many market segments, the changes that are happening are fast. They're driven by demographics. They're driven by technology. And I think at one estimate, we think a lot about this at Boston College, and specifically the Boston College Center on Wealth and Philanthropy recently suggested that aging boomers, those folks born between World War II and up to about 1963, will pass on some $59 trillion to their heirs. How they do it, why they do it, and the tools they use to provide that trusted advice to their clients is changing substantially. And so that's what I think we're here to talk about. And most importantly, this great transition. So Brendan McSheffrey, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. What is the great transition? How do you think about this, and why is that important in framing the challenges facing the advisory industry today?
Well, the great transition came to our attention as we looked at both the demographic shifts, the technology changes, and as we looked at the market as a whole, the growing threat of substitution for all advisors, as well as different layers in the advisory value chain. So broker-dealers, OSJs, RIAs, all feeling the pressure of competition in a way that they hadn't before. So that was the genesis of the idea, was really looking at these trends as one big mega trend. And I think Terry also has a terrific way of putting it as we look at the details of it.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, and Larry for helping us with this topic. But the Great Transition really revolves around the demographic shifts that are happening not only to your clients but also in the industry, the regulatory environment that we're all dealing with the DOL and other forces that have had a major impact on it, and then the shifts in technology, and technology is rapidly improving and changing, and we are all having to deal with it in our own way, and you know, how we embrace it and which you know, what technology we embrace is going to have an impact to the success of your business. So I think, you know, as we think about it here at Trulytics, you know, those are the things that really encompass the Great Transition: demographics, regulatory environment, and technology.
Terry, talk a bit about the industry itself. Talk about the advisor industry. Who's in it? What are the kind of businesses that are running, that are emerging within the advisory industry itself, wealth management?
Yeah, when you think about it,
what does that landscape look like?
Yep, thanks, Larry. The industry, when you think of the subset of financial services in terms of wealth management, it comprises over 300,000 advisors, trusted advisors who manage money for their clients. They employ, you know, there's 700,000 people in it, and they are in many cases independent business owners, either clearing up through a broker-dealer or RIA, or work for a wirehouse firm like Merrill Lynch, and they manage trillions and trillions of dollars for their clients.
How do they interact with them today versus how they might have interacted with them 10 or 15 years ago, Terry? Both in terms of the advice, the products, the things that they may see in a client's portfolio. How is that changing?
Well, it's been changing for the 3 decades that I've been in this business. You know, it used to be very, very relational. It still is, but initially it was a lot of product selling and you know, commissionable sales, and that led to a transition to fee-based you know, plans where they put them in a managed account and planned, and you had a lot of folks that started to go to fee only, whether that was a fee on assets under management or actual fees that they were charging to clients by the hour. But we have seen a huge shift from a transaction-based business to a business that is much more advisory, and we've seen the changes in technology. You know, it used to be that we could charge for advice and get paid handsomely for it, and because of technology shifts and information that's available to everybody, including their clients, in many cases, clients are as informed and have as much information as the people in our industry. That value of investment advice has started to come down significantly, and we as an industry have to start to change and become that trusted advisor. And I think that's part of the piece of this great transition that we're all trying to deal with as we look at the numbers. I mean, you know, there are 120,000 advisors that are set to retire or exit the business in the next 10 years, and how we interact with our clients is going to be critical, and how we embrace technology is going to be critical.
Interesting. So we are a graying population generally in the U.S., and I think what you're saying is that the advisory industry reflects that. So we have a generational challenge, both in terms of the kind of advice you're going to provide, but it sounds like the typical advisor has been in this business a long while and has to cope with these, whether they're in their 3rd decade of doing this or 4th decade of doing this.
Yeah, and one comment I'll make, and I'll pass it over to Paul or Brendan for any comments, but you know, you're absolutely correct, Larry. The average advisor is representative of the population. Where, you know, I think depending on the study you look at, it's somewhere between 50 and 60, how they cut it, and there aren't many people coming into the industry. It used to be that that there were thousands of new recruits that came in through training programs at insurance companies and brokerage firms that started there. Those training programs have almost all but gone away. So we don't have a lot of new people coming in, and the generational shift from when you think about the next gen or the millennials or Gen X, they have a different view of what they want to do and how they want to be serviced and what jobs they want. So we don't have a lot of new people coming into the industry to replace those that are looking to exit.
Brendan, you've been in technology for a long while, and you've seen certainly how people react to innovation, and it certainly is generational. What are the kinds of things that an advisor who's been in the business for a long while needs to think about in dealing with this, whether it's G2 or G3, who's coming in and really having a voice over the wealth planning, wealth management of someone in a way perhaps that they hadn't before?
Well, the massive shift in technology, can't be avoided. I mean, you look at right now the mega trends in the technology space are the fact that artificial intelligence technologies are starting to grow at an exponential rate, meaning they're becoming twice as powerful as they are today every 18 months. And as artificial intelligence tools improve, it's going to change how advisors and people and clients interface with data. These types of shifts have occurred in other markets, but even looking at this market as a whole, I'd say there's some very unique things going on with the convergence of not just technology but the demographics as well. So you have it's the convergence of forces that I think are a bigger trend as a whole than just the technology alone. Although technology, each individual advisor and broker-dealers obviously cannot ignore technology. I mean, there's not a broker-dealer out there right now that is not either upgrading their systems or looking to upgrade their systems to keep clients and advisors tied together. So it's clear the market recognizes it, but even as we look out down the road, the exponential growth of AI is a real threat to advisors and the industry as a whole.
We'll talk a bit more about that. I want to stay with the advisory business. And Paul, you've seen lots and lots of advisory businesses, large, small, in various markets and sectors. If you're one of these 120,000 advisors in the U.S. who is thinking about how your role has changed as a trusted advisor, and you may want to be thinking about in a few years transitioning this business, what are the kind of things that you're seeing people that consult with you every day, what are the kind of things that advisors who are running their own businesses, understanding the shifts that Terry and Brendan have articulated, what are the kind of things that they think about today and perhaps should be thinking about?
I think it touches on a lot of what has been talked about up to this point. You talked about, I hear the numbers, Larry. I heard 40 million of 30 million $1 trillion transitioning, 40 million. You just mentioned over 50 million transitioning, and you talk about the baby boomers. And I agree with Terry. You look at our industry. Everybody would point to the start of the independent sector of financial services in 1979 when the first graduating class of CFPs all got their licenses. And now you look at an industry where the average advisor is 60 years old. So in essence, they're either baby boomers or close to being a baby boomer. And there's on this slide right here, you're looking at 19% of firms have succession plans, which means there's a fact in general industry that 70% of all businesses will fail in their first generational transition. So you look at the amount of opportunity, $50 trillion of assets. The question is going to be, is there going to be fewer firms around to assist this transition of wealth? And I think when you look at, a lot of firms look at themselves in preparation of capturing this, and they look at their business, and in reality, where a lot of these businesses right now are operating at, in the longest bull market in history. So they're watching their revenues continue to increase, but a lot of advisors I speak with are very concerned about their expense structure. These businesses are becoming more costly and more complex to run. With Terry's mentioning, which I agree with, that the lack of young talent coming into the industry, you really, the question for advisors is how do you increase capacity and how you increase scalability? And a lot of the advisors are now focusing on looking at technology to do that. It does increase scalability, it does increase capacity, but a concern in my conversation with advisors is, as advisors, even as they continue to gravitate to technology, I read a recent study that while most advisors are still only using 20% of the capabilities of the technologies they're using. So example, if I'm using Redtail or Salesforce, I may be using only 10 to 20% of the capabilities of that technology. So they're embracing it, they're starting to use it, but they're not using it or learning it to what it could potentially really do for their firms. You're looking out 5 years, I think what's going to really jeopardize a lot of businesses is the time they're giving themselves to prepare. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, myself included, we don't think about exiting the business, except the day we wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, we decide to be out at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and what I consider to be a transferable asset in my business may not be a valuable transferable asset to somebody else that wants to buy it. There's the perception of what am I have I built transferable value. So I think what a lot of firms need to begin to think about is not their exit plan 15 to 20 years, but the sustainability of their business model over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that it can buffer against the downturn in the marketplace, again, being in the historical bull market. It can control its costs, it can maintain its margins to be able to capture this amount of wealth that's going to be transitioning.
So, Paul, you talked about a stat that struck me as something that people really want to think about. 19% of advisors, some 90%, have succession plans. What are those succession plans? Are they broad and nebulous? Gee, I'm going to sell it to folks who work with me, for me. Is it, gee, I'll wait 7 years and hire an intermediary? When we talk about the folks that do have a succession plan, what are those? And what's the one thing, and we'll have a little bit more time to talk about this, what's the one thing that you think is an essential for a succession plan, guiding principle?
So the 19%, when I started, co-founded Gladstone 11 years ago, that statistic was called 20%, 19%. 11 years later, that statistic's 19 to 20%, and advisors attend these webinars, they read the trade journals, they attend conferences, that they're inundated with the noise of succession planning, but that statistic hasn't changed. And I think the fact is because succession planning has become a kind of a dirty word. Advisors don't think about hanging up their cleats and walking off the field, so they confuse succession planning with exit planning. Succession planning really is the interim plan. Hey, I may be thinking out 10, 15 years, eventually hang up my cleats, but what plan do I have in place today that protects the business against an unforeseen event? I don't show up for work on Monday. I'm hit by the proverbial bus. I'm disabled. How sustainable is my business? And I think advisors need to focus more on the interim plan than the long-term plan. Maybe start calling it corporate planning and not succession planning. It gets more advisors to do it. I think the two takeaways I would tell advisors is I see as a detriment for many advisors that we enter into conversations with regarding transition planning. One is the transferability of the asset. These businesses are relationship built. They're built over 10, 20, 30 years of relationships with clients. It's impossible to wake up on August or July 20th and say, I'm going to exit the business and start in January, and I'm going to have the greatest plan in place that transitions 20 years of relationships. It's very difficult to do. Advisors need to start thinking long term. How do I think about transition this business and my relationships over the next 3, 4, 5 years, and a plan for doing that? The biggest takeaway is give yourselves time. The longer you have time to plan, the better plan you're going to have. That 19% statistic, while it says there are succession plans, I have reviewed existing succession plans, hundreds of them. I will tell you most of them don't truly work. It's a plan they feel they need to have in place, but at the end of the day, they let that plan sit on the shelf for 5 years. They haven't reviewed it, and come to find out their facts or situation objectives have changed, and that plan no longer really accomplishes what they set out to do. So give yourself time. Really figure out, do you have a transferable asset? Can you transfer relationships? Because that generates revenue and profit and has an expense attached to it. Can you transition them? And the third is, if you have a plan in place, Make it part of your corporate planning every year to sit and review it just to make sure it still accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish.
So transferability of the asset and really thinking about the perspective that a potential buyer might take, I guess, is what I'm hearing for a lot of advisory businesses. Brendan, I want to speak, I want you or Terry to perhaps speak to some of the other risks. I'd like to, we've talked about the demographic risk, but let's focus a bit more on some of the risks that you and Terry raised to begin with, the regulatory impacts and then the technology risk. The Department of Labor has new fiduciary rules. In addition to having an advisor thinking about the generational transfer and how they can best communicate with the different generations that they're going to be serving, what's going on at the federal level or the regulatory level that is also going to impact the kind of things that an advisor has to think about in as they do this corporate planning? And I like that the term Paul used, the corporate planning going forward.
Terry, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, the thing that I can't stress enough from where I sit and what I see is that this fiduciary rule, it is going to go into effect, and even if there are changes to it, it's here to stay. And you know, I've heard it, and I've heard it said so many times, and I don't think anybody disagrees with the basis of it. I think everybody agrees with, and that is doing the right thing for clients. A lot of the overhang was on the actual, you know, the regulators getting in there and putting in place all sorts of things that made it a lot harder. The costs went up, but it's not going away. It was originally it's really only around qualified plans, but it's going to creep into the non-qualified sector as well. And we just have to recognize it and embrace it to the degree that we can and live with it and deal with it. Because the genie's not going back in the bottle, and it's led to all kinds of things. I mean, we're seeing fewer broker dealers. There's been tons of consolidation, and that will continue because you need scale to be able to make the investments and have the be able to embrace those higher costs that are associated with it. So we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry. Paul sees it every day, and you know, it's not going away. There's been technology that has been developed to help us through that, and you have, you know, now you have all kinds of different technologies around risk assessment and wealth, you know, financial planning tools that are needs-based, et cetera. So, you know, I think that what I would suggest is that people embrace it, and you know, the industry was very, very hamstrung last year, particularly around a lot of the product sales that were going to be impacted. And you know, we need to get on and move on because the clients that financial advisors work with every day need those products and services that are out there, and we have to just deal with the regulatory environment.
So it's always been a highly regulated environment for that advisor, and now that continues, and it sounds like there are substantial increasing costs, but there's also technology in a lot of ways to deal with some of these, both in terms of tracking and compliance. But I think you're right, true of any business, but especially this business. It's going to continue to drive consolidation as people try to deal with the increased regulatory environment and significantly more costs. Brendan, talk a bit about, we've talked about transferability of assets, the impacts to an advisor's business. I'd like to talk a bit more about the technology and the fact that the increasing role of sort of robo-advising and the like. So if we're thinking about transferability of assets, maintaining a business, taking a perspective that involves corporate planning, what's going on in helping that advisor really to understand that how that next generation is interacting with their advisors, how they think about wealth, and how they think about wealth management tools and its value?
Well, it's interesting. There was a study that we just heard about the other day that found that even baby boomers, as clients for advisors, are incredibly adept at using apps and other technologies to interface with their advisors. So it's not just the next generation that's using technology; it's current clients as well. And I would share this perspective. It's very hard for us as normal human beings to predict and see where technology is going to go, as it changes so fast as computing power gets more powerful every generation, that again, that exponential growth. But one way to think about it is it's only been 10 years that the iPhone has existed. And 5 years ago, Siri didn't exist. 3 years ago, Alexa didn't exist. So as we think about these AI chatbots and the interfaces that we have to computers, the evolution that we are experiencing right now as consumers is going to show up on clients' desktops, in clients' hands, and advisors' hands, and it's going to continue to get smarter and easier to use these tools over the coming decade. Now, the good news is that advisors can use these tools to their advantage, but as Paul pointed out before, just because you have Salesforce or Redtail or Riskalyze or eMoney doesn't mean you're necessarily getting the most out of those tools. And as Paul also pointed out, the best time to get using these types of systems is really 10 years ago, and embracing them as you go. But I think there's three things advisors should think about in this approach. One is what these tools can do for an advisor is provide profound knowledge of their business, and it allows them to instrument their business. So the third, if you need that profound knowledge and you have to instrument your business, I would suggest today that any advisor using Redtail, Salesforce, etc., one of the best things they can do today is start embracing the features inside of the software that they already have and build
like
new.
What are the kind of things that they can be? What are the kind of things that they can be thinking about? It's this is challenging for anyone who buys such robust technology, but what are some of the things that they can do to, quote, instrument their business and use the tools robustly?
Well, really simple. I was speaking with an advisor about 3 or 4 weeks ago that he himself did not have access to his own QuickBooks because he hands it off to somebody, to one of his staff. But he wasn't able to readily get his hands on the knowledge that he needs to do a phone call with a client. And it's really simple steps of saying, what is the information I need at the point of use, and what are the types of steps and actions in my business I want to automate. So instrumentation can happen on lots of levels, just as simple as creating an alert inside a Salesforce, but actually paying attention when that alert comes in and making it a habit to build those types of alerts can be the habits you can build upon to become the cyborg advisor of tomorrow. That's another term that we've been using in-house, which is basically the idea that a normal advisor using lots of robo tools and lots of automation can become a cyborg advisor and compete in tomorrow's environment.
And Larry, this is Paul. If I could just touch on that for a second, I'll give you an example as well. I think you hear me say this all the time in these calls or in meetings, that the most precious thing to anybody is time. We cannot invent more time. I've said time a couple times now on this call, and it's the ability to create time and be efficient with time. I was working with an advisor likewise who was using Salesforce. He has about 15 advisors, and they're using Salesforce strictly as a CRM. And interestingly, every 2 weeks at their staff meetings, they have reports that shows new prospects, new opportunities. The advisors are keeping that on an Excel spreadsheet. They're taking the time inputting manually all this information. And I said in a meeting, I said, Salesforce has a workflow system that creates customized reports. The principal of the firm did not even know that. And so, and we started thinking about it. I said, if you could give your advisor 15 minutes of his time back each day, he could use it to go have a longer lunch, or he could use it to be productive in the office and do something else for a client or find a new client with that extra 15 minutes. It's the embracing of the features, I think, is very important with technology.
And Paul, how does the use of technology, how does the understanding of some of these cyborg tools, as Brendan coined the term, how does this translate into potential value for a company that might be thinking about either transitioning, getting sold, or becoming part of something larger in 3 to 5 years?
And that's very important. If I look at this and I put my investment banking hat on, and let's just say I'm representing a buyer in a transaction, and we're looking at a firm, and the firm is using either antiquated systems or proprietary systems, the first question you ask as a buyer is, how, when I do an acquisition, will I translate those systems, that knowledge, those models over to my existing platform? And the question is, if I'm on legacy systems, do I have to reinvest or invest in technology to get this firm up to speed, which affects value? The buyer's not going to pay for that. He's going to take it out of your value. If I'm looking at a proprietary system and I'm saying there's risk in acquiring this way he does his financial planning, he uses his own proprietary, is there a risk in a client attrition, or is there client disruption by migrating over to my system? So the more standard processes and procedures and industry understandable systems, processes, and technologies people use makes it easier in a transition, because I can translate. If you're on Money Guide Pro but I'm on eMoney, that's translatable. That they function similar in some ways. So I tell advisors, at least look at a technology standpoint from a value creation standpoint, because if I can translate it as a buyer to my business, I'm willing to pay for it. If I can't, I'm going to discount you.
Great. So these are investments in time, energy, money for an advisor, and they can truly think about this as some sort of ROI on their own business.
Stop thinking it as everything. As entrepreneurs, we look at everything as an expense. We need to start looking at everything many things as an investment with an ROI. ROI in monetary terms, ROI in terms of time.
So the biggest risks to advisors, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to answer kind of the broad question. If you were an advisor right now, what do you do now, today? And what do you think you ought to be doing, say, 6 months from now? Or how are you going to measure the success that you've defined for yourself? So, Paul, I guess I'll throw it out to you. If you're an advisor and you had to give them a short list, a takeaway, hearing what we've told them about today, the technology risks, the regulatory risks, the demographic risks, which are not going away, what are the kind of things that they ought to be doing? What's an advisor to do today?
I think, listen, I think this industry right now, we all would agree, there's a tremendous amount of chaos in this industry right now. Transition of 50 trillion of assets, the regulatory environment, the cost of running, there's so much chaos. But inside of chaos, there's opportunities. There's opportunities for advisors who really looking to the future to have a very sustainable, profitable, perpetuating business model. I think what firms need to look at, advisors, I would tell them is this a aspiration to grow? Every advisor wants to grow. They want new clients. Is it an aspiration, or is there a real strategic plan behind their growth? I think advisors, if they have the aspiration and it's just aspirational and there's no plan, they're destined to either not accomplish their objective or to fail miserably in the process. If you truly want to sit down and create a real strategic plan that says, I want to be here in the next 5 years knowing all this opportunity that exists, that means I need to look at my corporate structure, my corporate planning, making sure the business is protected if I'm not here, my long-term, my capital needs, my use of technology, how to embrace that, how much I would need to invest, what does that look like? And at the end of the day, how do I incentivize, continue to maintain this great staff that I have? So I think it's sitting back, looking at a very global perspective at the business, stop being with less aspiration and more planning behind it, because those firms that plan for this right now are in a wonderful position for the next 5 to 10 years.
Terry, what do you think? Is it more, which is more important, the internal focus on the business, the external focus on the outstanding factors we've talked about, or is it both? Your advice. What does an advisor do now?
Well, I think it depends. If you're an advisor that's on the call or in the industry that is 1 to 3 to 5 years away from exiting and are one of those in the 120,000, I would strongly suggest that they look internally and make sure that they have addressed all the things that Paul has talked about, that they have a transferable asset, that it is a business, that they run it like a business and it's not just a lifestyle. Because if you're one of those folks that is looking to exit the next 5 years, and it really is a lifestyle, it's going to be hard to find somebody to buy it and to get the price that you think it may be worth today. For those that have a longer time horizon and are looking to grow, I would look at this as maybe one of the biggest opportunities they'd ever had to, or will ever have, to bring in new assets and new clients with the wealth transfer, not just at the client level, but at the advisor level, being able to go out and potentially buy other businesses or blocks of business, grow organically inorganically, because there's going to be a huge opportunity to grow inorganically. And for those advisors that are going to be around for a long time, how are you going to deal with the Gen Xers and the millennials, and understanding the way that they're going to be interacting with this? Embrace robo-technology. I mean, part of what happened with the DOL has led to a rise of robo-advice, because we can't afford to spend the time with clients that don't have lots of money, because it just isn't worth our time. We need to figure out how to reduce those costs, and embracing robo-technology can help you do that, and bring in folks that can work with that next generation. So, I think if you're looking out 5+ years, this is the biggest opportunity if you're ready for it and you embrace it.
Brendan, as a tech entrepreneur and someone who thinks a lot about these kind of things, Paul says be strategic. Terry's saying be strategic, perhaps being a buyer or a seller. Think about how to grow that business and fast.
Well, the strategy
advisor to do now.
Strategically, the technology in this space is to me, it's all about the threat of substitution, and an advisor either not getting the client or losing a client because of the changes in technology and the client's access to data and knowledge. So I would think that advisors would want to focus on technology features that provide profound knowledge and time back to the advisor, automating things and creating new time. The manufacturing and healthcare sector have used the term profound knowledge for generations, and really what that means is knowledge that you can make decisions on to improve your strategy. So advisors should pursue technology tools that provide knowledge and time back to them, and start building habits today to use those features in the tools that you already have that can provide knowledge and time back to you. And so, everybody in the tech sector will use the term, you don't swallow the whole elephant at once. And, using robo tools or software tools to automate, the recommendation is always one step at a time. Choose to improve one part of your business a month, or one part, turn on one new feature a month. But focus on those ones that provide knowledge back to you or provide time. If you can, choose a feature in Salesforce that gives you 15 minutes a week. Well, that adds up. So that would be what to lower risk today, one step at a time, start turning on the features, build new habits.
Great advice. So embrace innovation and do it at a pace that makes sense for you and for your business. So yeah, I know that we have a chance to take some questions, and we'd certainly like to open that up, and I'll ask Kevin Gully, our organizer, or anyone else who perhaps has submitted a question and might want to pose it to one of the panelists.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Larry. And by the way, great job, everybody. Very interesting topic. So one of the questions we received was, how do you envision that the lack of younger advisors coming into the industry is going to impact this great transition, and how will it impact acquisitions, mergers? Well, I guess M&A. I started M&A.
So this is Paul. I'll take a stab at this one. There's a term that we're using now at Gladstone, which says the industry is collapsing up, meaning, everybody talks about consolidation, which usually most conjures up the thought of, selling to an aggregator that's going to bundle a bunch of firms together and say they have critical mass, so there's value. What we're seeing is like-minded firms that are geographically similar, looking at their businesses now and saying, we're both trying to solve for the same issue. We're trying to solve maybe for our own succession issues. We're trying to solve for our own internal cost issues, i.e., you have a compliance officer, you're paying $1.52. When I have a compliance officer, I'm paying $1.52. Do we both need, do we need two compliance officers? And the third is young talent. By bringing firms together to create synergy in the infrastructure, from an infrastructure standpoint, including talent. That's how I think a lot of firms are going to, I think you're going to see a lot of mergers. Now, mergers take on different forms, but you're going to see firms beginning to merge to solve for the talent issue. We're also seeing firms trying to figure out how to create apprentice programs and training programs to bring in young folks that may not be quote unquote qualified financial advisors, but have the personality and acumen to become a financial advisor, and they're actually training, setting up training programs for them.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, this is Terry. The makeup of some of these younger kids is very different than the way that many of us that got into the business got into it, which was, we got trained and then they gave us a phone book, a desk, and a phone, and we had to go out and eat what we killed and grow our client base. That's not necessarily the way that a lot of this the younger generation works, but they love what they do, and they can get into it and start assigning some of those younger clients or the children of your clients to those younger advisors, where they face off to bring in folks, and as Paul said, have the develop through apprenticeships, or I know a firm that works with a local university, and they have a scholarship for kids, and they bring them into their firm as they get out of college, and start to work with them, embrace the younger generation. And the last thing I would say is, make sure you are talking to the next generation and to the children, because you can do an incredible job making their parents wealthy, but if you don't have that relationship with them, when that transfer happens, you are in danger of losing those assets. And Fidelity tells us that if you don't have a relationship with the kids, you're going to lose 80% plus of the assets to someone else. So I think it's really important to focus on not just the younger generation in terms of bringing them into your practice, but also the younger generation in terms of your client base.
So I do want to be able to make sure we leave time for the demo. So I'm going to pop a quick poll up on the screen and ask the last question that I have here, which is, will there be fewer and larger firms in the future based on this transition?
This is Paul. I'll take a stab at that one real quick again, just to lead. The answer, I believe, is yes. And I'll tell you, 11 years ago, I could count the number of billion-dollar firms on one hand. Fast forward to today, I need to be a bit of an octopus to count the billion-dollar firms. Not only is there a great transition, but there's a great transition in the businesses as well. We're starting to see businesses transition from more of a lifestyle type mentality to a real enterprise. We're starting to see, dedicated CEOs and management teams being put in place inside of these businesses, because with margin compression, expense costs, firms are figuring out with greater scale they can maintain their sustainability. So I think I also say, 10 years ago, a $500 million firm was a large firm. Today, $500 million firms are considered tweeners in our industry. So I think you're going to start to see more branded recognition of wealth management firms over the next 10 years, and you're going to continue to see this migration of collapsing up to create bigger, stronger, faster, sustainable businesses in our industry.
Thanks, Paul. So, what I'm going to do now is, and by the way, thanks for answering the poll, everybody. Some questions, some answers are still coming in, but it looks like demographic shifts is the winner. Oh, it just got closer. Demographic shifts and compliance and regulatory issues are almost in a dead heat right now, with Robo-Advice coming in third. So thanks for answering those. Appreciate that. And I'm going to right now transition this over to Terry, so that he can give us an overview of the Trulytics platform, because I think, as you folks will all find by taking a quick look at this, you will see that it's going to help most advisors put themselves in a position where they have much better understanding how to think about their firm moving forward in the great transition.
Thanks, Kev, and I'll go through this very quickly. But as I said, if you're one of the folks that has, in 1 to 5 years, you want to hang up your cleats and exit and have a successful sale of your business, this will give you great insights. and give you a valuation. It's really a diagnostic to understand what your business is worth, what drives your business, and then use benchmarking. So it's not just for people that are looking to sell, but it will be for people that want to understand their business and what drives it. When you go into the software, we ask questions on 7 areas of your business: your firm, your ownership structure, advisors, clients, processes, revenues, and financials. It will then generate a discounted cash flow Trulytics evaluation value of your business, and it will give you a score on your business, client, and market stability with the potential impact that that has on your the value of that business. The questions take about a half hour, no more than a half hour if you have the answers to the questions at your ready. Ask questions around the firm, when you were established, how you're structured, how many owners, advisors, etc. Grab the ownership information, their age, whether they're advisors or not. We ask about the advisors, how many there are and whether they're employees. Client information, how many do you have, what's your AUM. Average client age, how many years they've been with you, how many do you add and lose each year. How do you get them? Do you do institutional business? What percentage of your top 5 clients what percentage of your AUM is your top 5 clients? We gather information on your processes, continuity plans, succession plans, also all use of technology. Then we get your revenues, growth rates, what percentage is discretionary and what you are getting in terms of recurring revenue, breakdown by product area, your financials, which would include 5 years of revenue if you have it, add backs and adjustments, and in less than 30 minutes and for roughly $1,000, you get an incredible valuation on your business, a score that will show you what, from an industry standpoint, where you are. It's on a 4.0 grade, so you'll know the health of your business, and then it shows you your P&L, your valuation ratios, and discount factors that went into the score. But more importantly is the scorecard. Here are the 40 key performance indicators that show you where you are potentially losing value and where you may want to spend some time to address those gaps. So by not having a continuity plan or a succession plan, you are losing value. If your client average age is too high, you're losing value. If you don't have a relationship with the next generation, or you have too heavily of a reliance on referral sources, all of these things go into the discount that is put onto the firm that a potential buyer is willing to pay. So it allows you to see how you can, where those gaps are, and it also allows you to do some modeling, so you can say, what happens if in 4 years, when I'm ready to sell, my firm grew by this much, or my assets were here, etc. So it's a very, very easy online tool that you can use, and it also gives you evaluation under other methodologies with low to high multiples. So at the end of the day, you get a Kelly Blue Book of what your business could be worth. So with that, Kevin, people can go to Trulytics.com. You can sign up. There's also a free version where you can get very basic information. It will not give you the full detailed report, but it is, unless you know where you start, you don't know what you need to improve upon. And we believe that this is a great tool that clients can use, and then we can provide back to you the benchmarking and analytics to help you look at where you are versus your peers.
Thank you, Terry. It was interesting as you guys were all talking about the biggest risks that might have been pushing, been facing the advisors. Each one of you talked about different things that could actually be really addressed by having clear understanding of the type that the Trulytics tool will actually provide to the advisors in terms of the benchmarking, in terms of the key performance indicators, in terms of where they're leaving value on the table. And this is especially true if you're looking to potentially sell your business or make that transition. And it's also true if you're looking to potentially acquire businesses and you want to understand and start doing some due diligence on firms that you're thinking about either merging with or acquiring in the future. So regardless of how you're planning on approaching this great transition, I think that the Trulytics platform is going to provide a tremendous amount of value as a way to be able to understand where you stand now and where you should be focusing your energy going forward. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists today, Terry and Paul and Brendan, for your great insights, and certainly to Larry Gennari, who I will have moderate any panel I ever have to sit on because he is as smooth as glass. And we do appreciate that, Larry, so thank you for joining us today. And thank all of you on the line for joining us today, because it was a great turnout. And I wonder if I can share this. Okay, so regulatory issues came back really fast at the end, and came and overtook demographic shifts. So anyway, everybody have a great day, and go enjoy the summer, and stop listening to webinars. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.